Okay, here we go. We're going to get started again here. So, Sue told us exactly what we needed to hear. And she's always a very tough act to follow. So, challenge to you there, Kevin. Okay. But I do believe our first panel today, getting to the next step, learning to lead, is up to the task of following Sue. The goal of this panel is to explore the differing professional perspectives of men and women, as well as the commonalities and the challenges and opportunities presented to women in the intense, high-stakes national security environment. Our panelists will offer insights into their personal leadership experiences, as well as offer some thoughts and advice for upward mobility, within the intelligence and national security communities. Our panelists today include Mary Abbajay, President and Chief Executive Officer of Careerstone Group, Janna Scott-Tarman, Deputy Division Chief at DIA, and a former INSA Achievement Award recipient. And if you really want to hear an interesting story later on, ask Janna to tell you where she was on 9/11, and you will be inspired, okay? So our third panelist is Colonel Jennifer Sovada. She's the Special Assistant to the Deputy Chief of Staff, ISR, the U.S. Air Force. And finally, Karinda Washington, Chief of Staff of the Partnership and Engagement Office at Department of Homeland Security. Moderating this panel will be Kevin Barron, Executive Editor at Defense One and a good friend of INSA. So join me in welcoming our panel. And
that's the briefest I've ever heard you speak. Appreciate that. Hi, I am Kevin Barron, and I am a man. So just to get that out there.
Congrats.
I've already been questioned why I'm here, and I'm thrilled to be here. And if you notice the program for the day, this is supposed to be about, as Chuck said, getting to the next step, learning to lead, about the career paths these women have gone through, advice for others coming up, and to get the discussion started. And later on, the program goes into the movement that's happening now, women in technology, men as allies, as Sue Gordon said. So it sounds like a great day. And I apologize to everybody over there. If you're looking at my back, I'll try to rotate a little bit. I want them all to give a little bit of introduction of their own past to where they are to get the talk started. But I am the executive editor of Defense One. We're a news publication, we're a website, we're part of the Atlantic Media family, so we're a sister to the Atlantic. We're like the national security sports page for Atlantic Media. It's a way to put it. And shorthand, I'm a Pentagon reporter. I've covered the Pentagon for over a decade. When it comes to women in the IC, it's similar to this, I think, in this movement of, we hear a lot about the mantle problem, right? This is the opposite of a mantle here. Defense One has its own event in the fall called the Defense One Summit. And a quick story, when we started out about 5 years ago, invited everybody, all the top names we could, and we actually got a pretty good return. We had, Chief of Staff of the Army, Secretary of Defense, all these big guys. And it turned out that we had one-on-one interviews with journalists of people who were actual sitting office holders, not formers, not think tankers. It was a pretty special moment. So we tried to keep that alive. Problem is, there aren't too many women at the tops of those agencies. And we took a little bit of heat of that, going, hey, where are the women on stage? And I said, hey, I'm trying to get the chiefs of staff. There are no women chiefs of staff. We're trying to get cabinet secretaries, and there weren't too many in the national security space. There were none. Tried to get some members of Congress or the chairman of the committees, not women. So I'm thrilled to be a part of an event that might help remedy that so that we can have more of them at my event as well. Fortunately or unfortunately, Trump changed everything for a lot of people in a lot of ways. And one way was that there were so many vacancies last year, by the time of our summit at the end of the year, we had to change the format and open it up to some formers and to some lower level office holders or people in the national security workforce. And to nobody's surprise, I think it made for a better event and makes for better conversations, and it made for a good, it was just better. So with that, I've asked in our pre-talk, we want all the panelists to go down the line and briefly tell us a little bit about your career path, and especially anything particular to other women helping you, anything related to all the things Sue Gordon had talked about, and we'll get started that way. So please, take us on.
I have to go first?
Well, you're next to me, so yes.
Comes with having the last name of Abbajay. I've always had to sit like front, right, and center, and all to school and everything. But my name badge is usually the first one in any kind of event, so that's fun. Good morning. My name is Mary Abbajay. I'm the president of Careerstone. Thank you for having me. Thank you, INSA. So my career path is I've been my own boss. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 28 years old. So about 2 years, about over 20-some years, about 24 years. And one of the reasons for my leadership was I had had a lot of experience with just bad leadership, or mixed leadership. And I was working for a chairman of the city council here in DC, and he was just a horrible, horrible person. And so I thought, you know what? He was horrible. He's dead now, so that's okay. I'll name him later. There's a law school named after him. He was just a tyrant. And I said, and I'd had all these kind of really difficult bosses. I said, you know what? I could be an asshole too. So I'm just going to be my own asshole. I'm going to be my own boss. So I got very interested in leadership right from the start. And one of the first things I did in my first business was I opened up a bar in Adams Morgan. And you want to talk about being the only girl in town that owns a bar? I was the only girl in town that owned a bar. And I started to really notice how differently we were treated by vendors. They'd come and sit around the delivery man and give us all their problems, but they never gave us tickets to the games, right? Or any of those other good stuff. So we had to be like their coaches and their counselors, but we never got the good stuff from it, So from there, of course, I moved into consulting and leadership development. And so that's where we are now with Careerstone Group. And we do a lot of work with leadership development, with talent development. And I spend a lot of time talking about gender issues and really helping women be successful in their career and as leaders. I'm a huge, huge believer in female leadership. So I get very geeked up about this. So that's a little bit of, and I just wrote a book called Managing Up. And it's really to help people on that path of leadership deal with the boss that they have, not the boss they wish they had. So.
And there are copies available.
There will be copies available all afternoon.
There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Please.
Hi, I'm Janna Scott-Tarman. My message, help isn't coming. Seriously, help isn't coming. It's us in this room. We're the help we've been waiting for. Help isn't coming. So that's the message. But the good news is we're too strong and too proud and too smart to burden the next generation with gender inequality. Help isn't coming, but it's in this room. So I joined the Department of Defense right after law school on the heels of 9/11. And I joined this amazing group of women above, below, and beside me. And over the last 16 years, we've risen up kind of together as a group. It's a great thing. We're running fast. And the higher we get, the more often I'm hearing great examples of female leaders. Female leaders. Nope. Great leaders, full stop. If we're going to change that vernacular, the help is in this room, because help isn't coming. So I've been with the department 16 years now. I've worked counter-drug, counter-terrorism, and counterintelligence, apparently all the counters. And I have had more great experiences with both men and women leaders in the department than I could ever recount. But early on, I also observed that selection table. It happened to be 3 men, but it could have just as easily been women. 3 men selecting who would deploy to Iraq. They had 2 volunteers, both equally qualified. They selected John over Jane because they didn't want to put Jane in harm's way. Their emotional need to protect Jane was more important than her dedication to the mission. Help isn't coming. We're the help Jane's been waiting for. So now in the department, I have the pleasure of being both a supervisor and a senior analytic reviewer, and I love it. I have more impact and influence than I ever thought I would have as a female in the department. But every once in a while, I still sit in those mission planning meetings where equally qualified employees are given their assignments for the week. And John gets target A, and Paul gets mission B, and David gets congressional briefing C, and Jane is asked to lead the holiday party. Help isn't coming, it's in this room. We can't always predict when ignorance and bias will appear in the workplace, but we can be prepared to be strong when it does and to stand up for our colleagues. And we're gonna do it not just for ourselves, but we're gonna do it for our transgender and non-binary colleagues as well. Has the department come a long way? Absolutely. Would I recommend the Defense Intelligence Agencies to young females? 100% absolutely, and we need you. But if I'm gonna recruit them, I'm gonna make darn sure that we have an environment that's fit for them when they get there. Because help isn't coming, it's up to us. We're the help Jane's been waiting for. So I mentioned our transgender and non-binary colleagues that we are going to support as well, and we're gonna do it with men as our partners, because when it comes to gender issues, we need every brilliant mind we can get, no matter what they look like. Additionally, we have the added burden of doing it while protecting the nation, because the nation is counting on us. We're the IC. It's not okay to throw a fit and walk out. Walk out is not an option when you're defending a nation. So we're gonna do it. We're gonna address gender inequality, and we're gonna address national security at the same time. Help isn't coming. The good news is, women are great multitaskers. So we'll get it done. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Colonel.
Hi, I'm Jen Sovada. I currently work and do private outreach for the 3-star general in charge of Air Force Intelligence, Lieutenant General Dash Jameson, who happens to be a woman. But that is an additional side story. That is not why she is where she is today. Prior to that, I was the commander of the Air Force Technical Applications Center, which is the only organization within the Department of Defense that does nuclear treaty monitoring. My leadership story starts off, of course, in the military 24 years ago. And actually, I would say almost 28 years ago when I was at the Air Force Academy and looked around me and was surrounded by men and wondered what I could do in this world to make a difference. The first thing I wanted to do was to be a leader within the cadet community at the Academy, and that then shaped my life for the next 24 years after that. I have tried to build relationships, to build communities, and to build avenues where anyone can lead regardless of their position, regardless of their rank, regardless of their sex. And that's important to me, that we build communities that lead at the most junior levels and at the most senior levels, and if you're the only woman or not. When I walked into my first meeting at the Air Force Technical Applications Center, I was the only woman in the room, sitting at the head of the table. Everybody else in the room had a PhD in nuclear engineering, physics, chemistry, something else, and I just have a Bachelor of Science in psychology. Very helpful, mind you. At the time, I realized that we needed to build an organization that accepted everyone and that empowered everyone, that engaged everyone, and that at the same time set expectations for everyone as to how we would treat each other. And from there, my leadership story continues, and I hope it will continue further on.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Karinda Washington, and I serve as the Chief of Staff in the Office of Partnership and Engagement within the Office of the Secretary at Homeland Security Headquarters. That is a mouthful in and of itself. And on top of that, last name Washington, there's just a lot going on here. But my leadership journey actually started from a very young age. I truly believe in exposure plants seeds. And the exposure that my parents gave me, I had a very entrepreneurial dad who was a veteran, but always had a side hustle, right? So he always had some type of startup. Before the term startup it was even a thing, John Washington had a startup. So as a very young person watching this father figure always starting and reinventing himself, I thought, oh, that's really cool. And then I had this mom who was just a go-getter and had her own nonprofit organization. And so doing community events, and from a very young age, I saw the examples of being selfless. So I had to share my parents with the community. Most times my dad was the only father in the neighborhood. I'm from Detroit. And so raised in the inner city, I saw my parents as that example. So as I continue to rise up, having a mom who's running this organization, who's impacting community development throughout the city of Detroit and affecting change, and taking me, I'm doing my homework at city council meetings while she's up talking about why she doesn't want a particular business open in our neighborhood. I'm doing my math homework. That transformed into leadership all along the way. Middle school, high school, undergrad, grad school, first job out of college. All those things transformed. And I look back now as chief of staff. I've been with the department 7 years. I landed in the department in our private sector office at a very senior grade at the time, 7 years ago. And people said, well, who did you know at Homeland Security? How did you go from a small nonprofit in Detroit to landing at Homeland Security headquarters? And I had to think about all the things and all the work that I put into it. I just put that resume in the USA Jobs. It was like, let it land there. If it's for me, it'll be for me. And lo and behold, 4 months later, 4 or 5 months later, I get a call on a Monday asking me if I can be in DC for an interview on a Friday. I said, sure, I sure can. Hung up the phone, called my parents. I need to borrow some money because I've got to be in DC for an interview. I mean, come on, right, parents? And who knew that planting that seed would lead to today, just October, as being chief of staff of this office, this new startup office at Homeland Security, and entrusting me with the responsibility of these 50 some odd folks who sometimes I feel like I'm their mom, right? Right? I have to take care of them on their day-to-day and in their personal lives. But having the exposure that I can lead, that not because I'm a woman, not because I'm a black woman, not because I'm from the inner city, not because I have all this education, I saw leadership. So I agree with my colleagues here that all of us in this room, we're responsible for exposing someone else. And as they see that exposure and they see that example, we're all planting seeds.
Very good. Well, those are wonderful stories. And I'm struck by how I think all of you said something to the effect of starting young in your leadership journeys. And I want to get to that. It's just after 9. Our panel goes to 10. We'll talk a bunch and do like the Q&A at the end. But please, anyone in the audience, if something catches your ear, raise your hand. We'll call on you. This is, as I said, conversational is always better than us just blabbing at you. So feel free to interject if you hear something you like. I do want to talk more about the specifics of being a leader, not just in your 20s, but maybe in your 30s and your 40s and 50s and beyond, to a room full of a lot of mid-career or some level of career professionals who are already here. Let's face it, if you're already in this room, you've already kind of started. You've already got a foot above most. And where to go from here in this climate. And I made Suzanne nervous, and I said, I'm a journalist, so I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of what's in the news and where we are now. This is the era of the Me Too movement. This is the era of this new awakening of women's issues, of transgender issues. It's a story in my beat at the Pentagon right now. It's a story on Capitol Hill. Yesterday, Janna Haspel had her confirmation passed by the committee, and I noted, I'm sitting there tweeting. That's what I do. I'm a reporter. I tweet. And in the first breath out of Sue Gordon's mouth, all she had to say was her name, Janna Haspel, right? To a full room of applause. Now, this is the IC. Janna Haspel is one of the IC, but she's not a non-controversial figure. And Sue Gordon, at the end of her speech, was talking about how one comment that can maybe throw things off a little bit. And I wondered if the comment that struck out with me was when Sarah Sanders at the White House says, hey, she's a woman, and if you're a woman, you should support her. And how do you balance the idea of women should support women, and what Madeleine Albright said, women who don't help other women have a special place in hell, with the idea of getting to a place where there is no gender to worry about. It's just leaders. And maybe an event like this isn't needed, right? So how does this moment resonate with you at this stage in your career? And how does a comment like that from the White House saying, hey, if you're a woman, you should support Janna Haspel blindly no matter what, does that help or hurt the grand cause? How about you, Janna, from NDIA?
So I want to support any leader that's committed, courageous, and charismatic. I don't think I have to blindly support women or men or anyone else. I think we can support one another even when we disagree with one another, so I guess that's a start. But for me, it's the leadership traits that resonate most with me are not gender specific. Again, committed to a mission, giving it all you got, courageous. It is oftentimes, and the topic of the day, it is uncomfortable to point out when ignorance has entered the room. But if we don't do it, we don't get to fix it. And then oftentimes I think even the folks that are being ignorant in that moment will appreciate later on that it's been called out to them. In my opening remarks, I used the example of, again, it happened to be 3 men selecting who would deploy, and they felt it was too hard to put a woman in harm's way, so they chose the man instead. I mean, literally, that's the reasoning they gave. I think it started from a good place. It started from, chivalry and, young boys hearing from their fathers and their uncles and others that, you protect your women. First of all, we don't hit them, or people with glasses, and we, take care of them. And I actually think that's a really nice trait. In fact, it's an attractive trait in men. We just have to change that dialogue just slightly to protect what she wants, not protect her. It's just a slight change, but if that table could have just made that slight change to, I want to protect what she wants, I think we would have came to the right result. And then the third leadership trait that I really appreciate is being charismatic. And Sue is the best example I think we could have had today of that. I mean, that energy, that true to self, bringing life where there is no life, those are the characteristics that I appreciate most in leaders. Those are the leaders I'm going to follow regardless of their gender. I do appreciate the idea that we're going to support all women. I think that is something we can get behind, but we're not going to support everything they decide.
Good distinction. How about at DHS? I mean, DHS now has a woman at the top for the first time, right?
Not the first time. Secretary Napolitano.
That's right, Napolitano. First time in this administration.
Right. I joined under Secretary Napolitano.
What kind of changes have you noticed?
The reality is, no matter when you enter the realm of leadership, you will likely walk into a room as a woman, and especially in the national security and/or intelligence community space, and be one of few women in the room. At Homeland Security, I am honored to walk into our chiefs of staff meetings on a biweekly basis and be able to walk into a room that's almost 60-40, that's more women than men. Secretary Nielsen is definitely going to have her challenges because we're still in a very, to be real, white and male-dominated career field. So national security space, intelligence community space, you're dealing with that dynamic. And I think that to have a statement that I'm going to support a woman just because she's a woman no matter what, I have to say within myself, my integrity, who I am, what that leader is projecting, is that something that I can support, whether you're a male or female, or you don't choose to identify a gender. Can I get behind your character, and can I support you for who you're presenting yourself to be? At DHS, I'm sure you see us in the news every single day. It's a constant 24-hour news cycle, and I have to then encourage my staff to be true to who you are. That just because that headline that's scrolling across Fox News or scrolling across situation this morning that's talking about you,
MSNBC,
or MSNBC or Defense One, just because that's the headline, that does not identify you. And so your true self, your authentic self that you bring into this office every single morning, when I see your face or if I see you on communicator, because, we're this telework society, be true to who you are. Don't allow what's being projected to reflect who shows up for work every day.
Well, that's a good message, a good point. I mean, the national security community and workforce, more than a lot of other jobs that one could have in this country, every day you're working underneath the headlines of what goes on. So you get to speak for the entire military perspective since you're in uniform, and everybody at the Pentagon and every COCOM around the world, how things have changed in this, the era that we've all found ourselves in the last couple of years.
So I think the biggest change that we've seen across the Department of Defense for the military is that we've had the ability to actually promote the women that deserve to be promoted. For example, Lieutenant General Legier, sitting right here, really kind of paved the way for what we were doing. The Army has done a great job. The Air Force is doing a great job. The Marines are even doing a great job of recognizing people for talent, for leadership, for their integrity, their honesty, where it wasn't before. It was based on what your gender was, what the jobs were that you had. If you weren't in the infantry in the Army, you weren't getting promoted, even if you were the top performer. The Air Force, if you weren't a fighter pilot, you weren't going to get promoted. That's starting to change based on the discussions about the importance of national security from a broader perspective, and understanding that we need to have cyber leaders and we need to have ISR leaders, and that we need to have their traditional fighter pilots and infantry and armor. But we need to have a community to build the strongest national security that we can.
Are we?
Can I just add,
Yes.
I think we conflate, like, to your initial question, like, she is a woman, so we all have to support her if we're women. I think we conflate supporting with the following on the big scale, and I think what it really means when we talk about supporting women is what are we, the small S's, like, what are we doing every day in our organizations to give women opportunities, like what you're speaking about? What are we doing every day as other women leaders, mentoring other women and making the opportunity for women? So I think we collapse the big gender thing, like, oh, we all got to support Gina Haskell, but that's not what we mean when Madam Albright says, and we say we need to support women, we need to be making those small opportunities every day, thinking about our culture, thinking about our organization, thinking about, are there paths for female leadership? Is there the room for the female perspective, and making room for that? That's what I think.
That's a good addition as well. And that, I mean, I was going to ask about the leadership, but I'll flip it to the opposite, about recruiting and at the base. Do you feel that's happening? I mean, I seem to feel it a little bit, but I'm not in the IC. I'm covering it. So any of you, do you see the young women coming in, with that different attitude? Do you feel confident that you're presenting them more, opportunities? Is it a positive message?
So I actually think that there are opportunities for people in any leadership position to point out that everyone deserves a chance. When I was in command, I had an organization that had several openings, and we had people who were applying for those positions, even internal hires. And people would come to me with the rank order of, we want to hire this person, and then if that person declines, we want to do this person, and so on. And I would ask questions like, well, why is this person more qualified than the other one? And I would get answers like, well, it's his turn, rather than she has a PhD and did postdoc work at Berkeley and has run these 5 experiments. And so we started in my organization flipping the discussion on its head and looking at how do we support people who really are qualified, even if they're younger, even if they're not from the old guard and has been in the organization for 20 years, and really trying to expose everyone to the fact that we all need to be leaders and we all need to make the tough choices, or otherwise it is going to be, it's your turn.
I wonder, does that also happen on the non-military part of the IC? And anyone in the audience who has experience with this, like General Legier, please speak up if you like. And I say that, she'll speak up if you know General Legier. But the idea that you said it's their turn. So I had a conversation this week with someone about the new COCOMs and the rotations coming for some of the chiefs of staff in the military, and that's absolutely still comes up. Whose turn is it? Either individually or because it's time for the Air Force to have that post, or it's time for Army to have that post. But there are 4 men who are chiefs of staff right now. Once again, all 9 COCOMs are men. There only was 1 woman, and she's gone now. So I don't know what the bench is beyond that. But that's good to hear, at least at one level, this change of conversation of who is qualified. Does that happen to the rest of the IC as well, this idea that it's their turn?
So I want to touch on a little bit on the recruitment and how we make opportunities available. I still think that there's a cultural shift that has to happen in regards to the turn piece. I think that it happens in the public and the private sector, that people will look out for who they're going to look out for. That's just the reality, and that's just a bias that individuals will have in the hiring process. I think for the junior and mid-career individuals that are coming into our organization, I'll give an example. I had an intern who came into the department. She landed with us. Great intern, but I knew that her heart's desire was to get into the IC. So because DHS, we have a piece of us that does IC, but we're not truly, you all allow us to kind of play in your space, but we're not truly in the IC. And so when the opportunity came up, she had applied for us and she had applied for FBI for the internship program. And the opportunity came for me to make a decision if I would let her dual. And you can only do it one time. And so I had a decision to make. Do I hold her back because I need her? Or do I look at her true heart's desire, talking about what she wants? Do I look at her true heart's desire that she wants to be at the FBI? So we go through the paperwork, we go through the process, we go through legal, we get approval from OGC, we get approval from Human Capital. Everybody agrees, we sign an MOU and agreements. She's graduating from GW this weekend. She landed her full-time job with the FBI. She will be at Quantico on June 11th. That's a success story. And that makes me proud that a year ago, we planted that seed, we allow her to have that exposure, and she's on her way. So I think that as leaders, we have to take a step back. It's not about us, really. We're a pass-through organization. we're allowing folks to be their best selves. And in order for us to do that, we have to be a little selfless and in tune with their heart's desire.
We've talked a lot about bringing others up along the ranks, but we said we would get a little bit to advice for, again, maybe for the women here in the room, men as well, about moving up themselves, like what you think, how things have changed. We talked in our pre-conversation about everything from whether it's generational issues or language or confronting masculine attitudes, which somebody else wrote, I didn't write that, about whether, it's being too soft or being too hard as a leader. Are you too rough? Are you too, either way. What's either through your own experience or just your advice, generically? Janna, how about you?
So I think Sue said it better than I will. Be true to yourself. I definitely have heard I'll call it a myth, I'm not entirely sure if it is, but I've definitely heard the myth that you have to, in the Defense Department, you have to behave like a man, and she mentioned it too, to rise as a female. I don't think anyone will argue that the military BDUs were cut for females. So in that sense, maybe we dress a little bit like men, but that's one very small category. I think otherwise, it's the women who are true to themselves, who love what they do, who love their mission that are rising, and that's the right ones to be rising. Again, I think Sue said it better than anybody else could, that be true to yourself.
Playing those games is over, that era.
I really think they are. I mean, evil exists, for sure, but it's few and far between. I think bias and ignorance is more frequent, but as I said earlier, we in this room are the help we've been waiting for, and we'll be strong when that happens. So be true to yourself and know that not only the women beside, above, and below you, but the men too will take care of you.
Well, as someone that works across multiple sectors, government, defense, private sector, nonprofit, I would say in terms of female leadership and whether you have to act like a man, I would say leadership doesn't exist in a vacuum. You have to consider the culture of your organization and the culture of your industry. So if you want to be a change agent, you have to have sort of one toe in the existing culture. You have to be able to understand it. You can't completely, if you're rising, you can't completely be a square peg in a round hole because it won't work. In order to change the game, you have to know how to play the game. And I don't think we give enough real acknowledgement to culture. For example, I have seen military leaders come to the private sector and fail miserably. And the military, it is much more about, not completely, but a lot more about hierarchy, control, command. People follow you because you have stars or bars, whatever it is that you all have, right? You go into the private sector and it's much more about influence. And so I have many, many female friends who are former military leaders, are now in the private sector, and they said they had to learn to lead differently depending in the industry they were at. So truly, when you think about whether you have to be a man or a woman, male traits, female traits, the trait you need to have in the 21st century is the trait of adaptability. To be able to understand the circumstances, the environment, the people, because leadership is about influence and adaptability and being able to change. And so that's really what I think we cannot have that conversation without talking about culture.
You want to add to that? We're good? Okay.
Sure, I will add to that. I also think you need to be competent. We often forget that we need to know our jobs
point.
and be able to do them well, and to be able to stand up to others and say why something is right or wrong, and have the facts to back it up. And if you can't do that, you don't even get in the room. And so the first step is to be able to get in the room, to have the influence that you need in order to make change. And that is leading with honesty, integrity, and knowledge.
All right, I want to open up the floor to questions. I hope we have a lot in hand. I don't know where the microphones are. But I'll take a moderator's prerogative, and I am going to ask General Leger to speak a little bit on, I'm not sure how many years you've been out now. It's not too long. 2 years, that's it? We have a microphone coming away, I hope.
Easy question.
We don't have a microphone coming. All right, so you get to speak loudly, like as if you were a general again, to a room. Here we are. Thank you.
We'll take two. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning. Good morning. I mean, tell us what you've seen. As you came up in an era that almost abruptly seems to have halted with this conversation that's happening now. You didn't get to lead during this conversation, and now you're out of it. What have you seen, and tell us whatever thoughts come to your mind. What are you hearing from those who are in, like this colonel on stage here?
Well, this is an exciting panel. And I was trying to think back 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, when you were arriving on the shores of the IC. Could you look up and see people that look like you and have that motivate you to get up every day to say, yes, I can. I'm going to take my place, and I'm going to work to be competent, which is the best advice, is start with that. And then add passion, and then show up every day. And then volunteer to do whatever people ask you to do, because you're going to learn amazing things. Not organizing the Christmas party, do that a couple times. But volunteer for the work that nobody else wants. So I would say, you asked a broad question. Things have changed immensely. I think the reason we're seeing more women promoted is at a certain point we began to flood the zone. Women like me who had nobody in our units, one woman in the unit of 600, who had men who said, I want you to pay attention to your own voice. I want you to take hard things. I'm going to continue to challenge you. Men did that for me because there weren't any women. And then you're going to turn around and hold your sisters responsible for their talent as well. Don't talk yourself out of this. I've gone in the door. Come in behind me, because as much as I love men, it's nice to have a woman's point of view, or a diverse point of view, or a person of a different gender, race, religion. They're informing your empathy, so you're really getting how well is your change taking place. And so I've been able to live that first step of when we brought women into the academies, and I was one of the ROTC classes where they went out and actively found, are you an athlete? Are you afraid to be in front of a crowd? Please come in, because we need a few. To now we're really seeing women come through the ranks who have done the work, who have had great men as sponsors, who have had women that have pulled them aside to say, keep going, it's a little scary. Don't take no for an answer. You didn't get that opportunity, go another way. There's another way over that wall. And we in the Army, I can't speak for the other services, but I tell you as a senior intelligence officer, I paid attention to the other services and said, you're not going to flood the zone with diversity if you don't start paying attention at that early level and get these women out of their own way and into the hard jobs. So the wars happen and women flood the zone because candidly, there weren't enough men to do that. The wars happen, and men who have said, well, I'm not sure I should send a woman into Mogadishu, they don't have any choices. And women go in there and just perform. And men say, why did I protect them from their profession? I want the best thinkers. I don't care if you're a man or a woman. And when they come up now for promotion, they have the credentials that you know they need for them not to be, well, I don't see any deployment experience. So in the Army, I would say, or in the military, while I was there, I'm so proud that before I left the military, the discussion of opening all positions to men and women came up. One, because I care about men, and they should not have to take the jobs disproportionately that they may not want. They should be able to follow their passions as well. And as long as women can only fill 30% of the positions, then men are going to disproportionately have to take jobs that they may not necessarily want. So the 100% opening of positions made a difference. Because you say to the woman at 18 or 19, if you want to be a cyber warrior, be one. If you want to be an infantryman and go on to ranger school, do that. Because nothing's holding you back except yourself. You have no excuse, there are no barriers, go after this. And I was able to sit on promotion boards where the discussion was not, we need to make sure we have enough women. It was, we have some immensely qualified people that for 10 years who have gone to war over and over and over again and done every job we've asked them to do. And the women that flood the zones now will pay attention, and they will do what you've said, is to make sure those slight things that still creep up every now and then, like, oh, you know, I remember as a lieutenant being told, my boss brought me in, what do you want as your next job? I said, well, I'd like to be the battalion logistics officer because I don't know anything about maintenance and I hate supply. So I'm thinking those are both important. I should probably do this. And this very kind colonel said, well, I think you're probably good with people because you're a woman. So maybe we'll make you the personnelist. And I said, I am good with women. I am good with people because I care about them. But what I really need is to understand maintenance and supply. So we're going to do that instead. And this is as a lieutenant, telling this old lieutenant colonel, you're not going to protect me from the education that I need that's going to make a difference down the line. So I think things are changing, but let's be very clear. We have to tell women to get out of their own way and apply for things and go after things and be fearless about things. Second, we need to be present in the promotion discussion to make sure that gender bias, that racial bias is not there, because we're not there yet. We're not there by any stretch of the imagination. And then we need to make sure we hold ourselves accountable to the standard to performance. And then 20 years from now, this is a different conversation.
Right.
But we are making progress. As for the transition to industry, I want to thank industry for making it easy. Because actually inclusive, we aren't really too hierarchical when you're dealing with men. Women come out of the military with amazing skills of getting knucklehead decisions made by just convincing them it was their idea in the first place. That's the key to success.
Manage up.
Yeah, manage up. You may not like your boss, but he'll be gone in a year, so let's just power through this. But to industry that cares so much about the national security sector, that wants the point of view of the people that have served in uniform, they've made it very easy. And that inclusive, roll your sleeves up, respect one another, let's just produce,
Right.
has been the world that I've found. So thanks for the question, Kevin. And everybody subscribe to Defense One. It's the National Enquirer at the
That's why she's my favorite general. Yeah. Thank you. Well, plenty to comment on, but maybe I'll key something up. The idea of seeing what you see on stage as something to aspire to, and how this opening of jobs, which is something we hadn't talked about, especially on the military side, changes the potential for leaders to come. And I wonder about the timeline of that, because when you report on the military and report on recruiting, for example, there's a line like you can't recruit a colonel. You have to start at the bottom somewhere. So when black recruiting drops, that means down the line there's going to be a dearth or a shortage of those types of folks, women, you name it, whatever the demographic is. So now we have all these jobs open, all these potential women, and one day I assume there will be a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that looks like you. Maybe you'll be it. Who knows? Is there, in your other agencies, are there comparable policy changes that have happened or that need to happen? Are you seeing the same sort of opening in the careers that have made a difference? You're nodding your head at the end here at DHS.
Yeah, so one of the beauties of being a baby in the federal government, DHS is only 15 years old, is we get to try a lot of new things and introduce a lot of initiatives to make DHS a better place to work. One of the things that I've had the beauty of working on is getting younger interns. So we usually focus on college students to be interns and really asking college students to come in and work for free, which that's another conversation. But if we don't plant the seed with younger, high school, right, really that's even still late. needs to be even younger than that, but planting the seed. So we started an initiative and a partnership with organizations that allow high school students to have opportunities in the STEM field. And so when we looked at the public sector agencies that had already been involved in this program, NASA, U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, all these other agencies, and I'm thinking, well, where is DHS? And really what it was is no one ever asked, could we participate? And so this summer, this first cadre of students will be at the department. It takes someone, again, just going through and seeing if we can push that envelope and not being afraid to push it. I mean, all you can do is tell me no, OGC, right? So it's to the point now where our general counsel just says, you know, Karinda, we just have an ask. It's like, well, yeah, anything. Stop coming up with new initiatives. Like, you make us have to do research. We got to figure out if we have the proper authorities to do this. And I'm thinking, that's your job. And I'm going to continue to do my job. Love OGC. But if we don't push the envelope and if we don't allow ourselves to dare to ask, to not be afraid to get the door shut, we're not going to get yes all the time. But we can introduce new opportunities that then could hopefully become an interagency best practice, right? These buzzwords we like to use that can be replicated. So DHS has that. We have a initiative going on this year right now. It's DHS Leadership Year. We're really looking at what does leadership look like at the department? How can we transform our leadership opportunities? I've instituted allowing our staff to rotate into the Deputy Chief of Staff position. So it's not a permanent billet, but allowing those staff within our department to have an opportunity to serve as deputy. You get to utilize that experience and put that on your resume to hopefully propel you for a Chief of Staff position later on somewhere or some other leadership position. There are little things that you can do that don't require an MOU, don't require you going out, that you can just implement so that folks in this room or in the folks that we get exposed to who are looking to get into a leadership position or at least getting their foot in the door to the federal government, which is a feat in and of itself, that we are creating safe spaces to have these conversations and to review resumes. The other night I was up, I promised this young lady that I would review her resume. It had been weeks and I was tired. I had just finished the document and I said, you know what, you promised. And so I stayed up until 11:30 editing her resume to get it back to her. I don't know what's gonna happen if she's gonna land somewhere, but I said that I would. All I have is my word. And who knows what's gonna happen for her for doing that. So we just that small touch that we can do to impact someone else's life.
Janna, you're doing a lot of nodding.
Yeah, well, you know, you started off by saying, will we see people that look like us above us? I really want to see people that look like me below me too. Just a sort of a little side example. So I'm a liberal hippie and my husband's conservative because I think it was our goal to raise the most confused child ever. And you know, in the recent violence in school movement, she wanted to go downtown and picket. And she told her dad she wanted to go downtown, and so he made the sign for her. You know, he was out there drilling with her. And I said, I'm so proud of you. Thank you for doing that. I know it's not exactly necessarily where you would have landed on the political issue. And he said, when you're standing on the other side of little girls that are picketing, you know you're on the wrong side of history. And I mean, that hit home for me so much. And then I went with her, and all of those little girls, oh my gosh, I saw more in them than I could ever see in my current career and those above me. So they're coming. Yeah. We better be prepared when they get here.
I don't know what to say after that. That's
Well, and I love that because I want to also pick up on something that the general said, which is really important, is we've got to help women get out of their own way, you know? And I think that in many ways, like helping the young girls, like understanding like making sure they're not in their own way right from the start. So when they come in and they're ready and they're strong and they're ready to go, that they are ready to go. Like who said the quote, like if the world was run by 12-year-old girls, we'd be a very great place, because that's the age where they are the most like energetic. They're still raising their hand in school. They're still being leaders. It's before they get all the messages of what they can and can't do. And so when I see young women, you know, and I think we have a generation gap too. Like, there is so much that we do that gets in our own way. In our generation, my generation, the language we use, the willingness to take notes in meetings, right? Sitting on the side of the table because we're going to be gracious and give people up a seat at the table. So we sit at the side. How many women have done that in a conference room? They're going to let someone else sit there because you're being gracious and nice, but you're giving up your seat at the table. So how do we keep us from our daughters from making the same sort of errors that we did?
Good. So please think of questions for these panelists. Some great experience here. The last one I'll ask, hopefully if we have a good audience participation, the message of what can men do to help, and how men have played an influence in either your own personal journey or what you're seeing happen in policy or just in your own individual offices. I'm the one of 3 boys. I've got 2 brothers. I now have 3 boys, so I'm very curious to know the message that I'm supposed to go home and tell them, because they're at the age where they actually still listen to me a little bit.
I think for me, the message is that everyone matters, and that everyone deserves a chance, and that you need to invest in people, because it is all about investing in the next generation. And all of my mentors were men. Until I worked for General Jameson, I had never worked for a woman. And I still have managed to be successful and bring people along behind me that are successful. And I think that is the most important thing you can do. And also give them the hard message. If they don't want to hear something, tell it to them anyway.
I agree. And I think, I know this is we talk about all the time, but you know, be aware that everybody has unconscious bias. Like, we all have it, right? And so don't be necessarily shamed or afraid to admit it. We all have it. It is there. We have a client in the private sector that it's a kind of a construction company sort of thing, and they have their whole entire leadership team is male, right? All male, and they're, except for their vice president of human resources but she doesn't sit at the table, right, with them. And they said, we want to coach some of our young people, our young women in leadership. So we have this one rising woman, and so we gave them a coach, and I gave her a coach. And about 2 months into it, the client called us back and said, no, the coaching isn't working. She hasn't gotten the executive presence yet. And we said, well, what's wrong with her? Well, she's so aggressive in meetings. Like, she wants to tout her numbers, and she kind of deflects, or challenges her performance feedback. And I sat there and listened to that. You know what I'm thinking? They would have never said that if it was a man. This was a very male-dominated culture. They're construction people. And I literally said to the guy, is she aggressive or assertive? And would you say that if she was a man? They fired us from that job, and that is fine. Because you know what? I know it. It was a tiny thing, but they wouldn't. And I know the woman, I know the leaders, and I know this organization. And she was nothing more than just sticking up for her career. So sometimes you have to call the truth out and get fired, but that's okay.
Right. So the message is, get yourself fired. And no, that's not. Questions, please. Right here in the center. I thought I saw you inching on your chair. Let us know who you are. Make sure you have a question.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Newsome. I'm a graduate student at American SIS. And I would like to thank you all today because the way you talk about leadership, like before today, I never thought of myself as possibly being in a leadership position because the image of it is different from what the values I have, like you have to do what I say, authority. But like with listening to you all speak and with Sue Gordon speak, the characteristics that she said was like, oh, well, my skills might be beneficial in certain, so it kind of opened my mind to the possibility of being a leader. So my question is, because you guys opened my mind to different ways of thinking about leadership, like from being on the ground, what are some things that surprised you when you experienced good leadership, like some characteristics of good leadership that surprise you that you don't hear a lot about, because you hear a lot about like bad leaders or like one way to be a leader, but what surprised you about being a good leader or seeing good leaders?
Good question.
Yeah, I'll start. As you all know, so being at Homeland Security headquarters, it means that the majority of our senior leadership are political appointees. So last January, when the Obama administration left, and until about May-ish, when I got new leadership under the Trump administration, I was acting chief of staff at that time. So my new boss at that time, in last May, inherited this chief of staff. So you can already imagine in April what I'm thinking, like, oh my goodness, he's coming. So let's see, let's say some prayers and like all will be well. And so he arrives in May and we click. And I'm like, oh, this is going really good, great. Well, fast forward a little bit, it's training opportunity time. And I wasn't going to put in for training because I thought my team needs to go out for training, so they're good. This boss comes to me and says, why didn't you sign up for training? And I said, well, sir, I wanted to make sure that we had enough in the budget for the team. I wasn't thinking about myself. And he said, you need to think about yourself. So let's go through these training opportunities. And so he stayed after work, forced me to sit down, focus on myself, find a training opportunity. And the one that was like bringing go, 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 I was thinking they're never going to spend this kind of money on me to go to this training. And it was 4 weeks. How can a chief of staff go off for 4 weeks? It's never going to happen. He said, there's one that's exciting you. Which one is it? And I said, how do you know this? This is creepy. You're creeping me out right now. So I tell him, and he's like, sign up for it. I said, sir, okay, did you see how much it costs and did you see that it's 4 weeks? What does that have to do with the excitement that you're feeling right now? So I went. Just completed the Harvard Kennedy School Senior Executive Fellows Program. God is good. So, thank you. If it had not been for that boss, who the reality is now is not my boss, because you know how, right. So, he's still there though, thank God. If it had not been for him taking the time to force me to focus on myself instead of focusing on the team, I wouldn't have even signed up for the training, let alone gone to the training, let alone completed it. So I would say that us being here today is inspiring you, you're inspiring us. Because you're going to be the one that we're looking to. And it's like, I remember her from the INSA event. I cannot believe, look at this. That's what, for me anyway, I'll speak for myself, that inspires me. Because if the impartation into you can inspire you, that you can be a leader, you are a leader. The fact that you're at INSA this morning and some of your peers aren't, it was raining, they made a decision not to come, or they're like, semester's over, I'm good, I'm sleeping in. You are a leader. Everything you do today, everywhere you go, every person you touch, every tweet you tweet, every text you send, every post on social media, someone liked that for a reason because you've influenced them. So you walk out your leadership journey because you're going somewhere.
And I would say the thing that most surprised me about really amazing leadership is the amount of emotional intelligence it takes. So we all know that you have to have the technical intelligence, you got to be confident. But I would say what's inspired me most are leaders that make people feel valued and valuable. And that's what your leader did for you, right? Being able to make people feel good about whom they are, knowing that you have to care about their success, and it comes down to how you treat other people. I just saw the CEO of Boeing speaking at the Economic Club, and they asked him his secret of leadership, and Boeing's a tiny little company, maybe you've heard of, right? And he said it comes down to one thing, how you treat other people.
Any other surprises in leadership come to mind? No?
For me, adaptability, and I know that you've already mentioned that. In the Department of Defense, we see a lot of kind of leaders and a lot of kind of missions, and you have to be able to flip. So, I have seen the same leader running an operations division where he was everyone turns left here, and then we turn right there, and then we, buy our Coca-Cola. I mean, like just really, really regimented. And that same leader led analysts the next year and was sponsoring coloring and painting hours because he knew he needed imagination in the second group and complete obedience in the first. So that was, that example of adaptability was not one that I had ever thought of before.
Good.
And then for me, I kind of have 3 E's. I say empathy, empowerment, and expectations. You have to be empathetic to what the individual is going through, know them as a person, get to know them, get to know their family, get to know their situation, empower them to do their job. Don't be lording over them all day, every day. Have you done it? Have you done it? Have you done it? That's about the most ineffective thing you can do. But then also have expectations so that you hold them to the standard. They meet their deadlines. They meet the quality that you need. And then you also help them to grow if they haven't met your expectations.
I'll add to that if anyone cares what I have to say at all, but about.
We do.
I know, I can't. No, I thought actually that my own brother gave to me, who leads a large musical theater, and he said, 80% of the time someone comes to me and they're all frustrated about something at work, and it's really that, and he says, what's really bothering you? And it turns out it's something in their personal life that has nothing to do with work. It's like, I wanted to get here, but I had to get the kids, and it's tax season, or whatever, my husband or my wife, or whatever it is, that personal, getting past your, just your work culture to the personal life a little bit, if you could offer any help and any flexibility and opportunity as well. The best leaders that I had as journalists coming up were the ones who gave me as much opportunity as like you were saying, as well as when you wanted that training for me, when you wanted that travel, when I wanted to get downrange. And get to someplace, that my bosses didn't want me to send because it was too expensive or too dangerous. But somebody just made it happen. Is what that's the person you never forget. That's the boss you never forget, and that's the person you want to emulate as you get bigger. Any other questions sweeping the room? Back corner. Good.
Hi. First off, I just want to say thank you to INSA. I started my Intel career here as an intern 11 years ago, and now I work for Janna. Hi, Janna. Janna, there was something that you brought up that really resonated with your subordinates at the table concerning the deployments. What you said happened. Allison and I have both been Jane. We don't want Lauren to be Jane, coming in more junior and wanting to deploy. What I wanted to ask the panel about was that type of bias that is sort of the kinder end of bias. We're used to dealing with perhaps how do I say this politely, the hiney grabbers, and we know how to deal with people that create a hostile work environment. But the fathers who try to protect us out of enhancing our careers because they don't want to see a woman come home in a body bag, they don't want to see someone harassed, and then we end up not getting the same level of opportunities simply because they don't want to see us hurt. I find that to be a very hard conversation to have, and I'd love to hear the panel's opinion on how to have that conversation.
Good question.
I can address that.
Please.
So one of the things that I usually do when I'm faced with those situations is I wouldn't be here unless I wanted to go. So the only person who is limiting me is you. And you have to be able to have that conversation, because if you don't, they won't ever even understand that they've made the decision based on emotion.
I had the conversation as a Catholic. You find your voice early, you can see it. And we all got to go. Right. And we made that conversation.
Can you bring the mic to her?
Remember these words, don't protect me out of my profession.
And
And I appreciate that you see me as your daughter. But my father has 4 sons. I'm the one who's in the Army. Do not protect me out of my profession. And my brothers are great. And it's probably the reason the Army was easy. Because when you grow up in a squad, it was like a really easy thing. Well, a lot of men. But to everybody, because I'm going to look around at the IC woman here and know those conversations have occurred. Be realistic, be fit, be ready, be insistent. And if you sense that they're conflicted because, well, you're a mom, we don't know how that's, you got to just say, look, do not protect me out of, I'm trying to set an example for other women, for other men. I'm trying to take my place. In 3 months, in 4 months, you come back with a year's full of insight. Remember those words, because certainly we've had to have it throughout our career. And God bless the men who see us as their daughters, because that means they're trying. But if it's getting in the way of our professional growth, and it's candidly sending the poor man downrange for the 27th time, who should be a father and a present son and a present whatever, don't protect me out of my profession.
And I think this is something that's going to change with generations too, and especially as you talked about flooding more women into the workforce when they get to leadership positions. I think we'll start to see, men and women will see each other differently. So I think it's, hopefully in 20 years from now, it won't be that same conversation. They'll be like, you go, I don't want to go.
Any others? Sure, go ahead. Oh.
Hi, my name is Ellen McCarthy. Thank you for coming today. I work at Nobles, was in government, agree the transition, not so bad. My question is, I'm a little on the fence when we started your discussion about promoting women, about promoting women, promoting men. And I keep going back to a story that was shared with me not that long ago, and it was a certain Speaker of the House. I'm not going to say who it was because I don't want to be political. So it was a certain Speaker of the House who actually made a point of when he came in saying he encouraged all of his party folks to promote women. If there was a woman and a man going for a seat, promote the woman. And it actually worked. And so what ended up happening over the course of his time as Speaker of the House, because he promoted that, was that the number of women holding seats rose. And now, if you go look at the numbers, it's actually slid back to before he was Speaker of the House. And again, I'm being apolitical here, but it really struck me that there was really something to a man promoting, he said, there's a man and a woman running, we're going to try to the extent we can promote women. He also was of the point that we're not going to promote an unqualified woman, but if there's two qualified people, we'll promote the woman. And I really thought there is something to that, because there's a lot of qualified women who I think don't always get that promotion because they don't have that sponsor. And so, I'm wondering what you think about, you can't say that overtly. I know there's a couple lawyers in this room, but there is something to.
There is. I mean, because it's still a man's world. I mean, there are more CEOs named John in America than female CEOs. More CEOs who are just named John than female CEOs. So I think whenever you have, it's just crazy. I think of, and by the way, male authors sell more books than female authors. It's crazy. I'm going to change my name to John. But there is something about the power structure, right? When a certain segment of the population has the power, it's like Sue said, part of their responsibility is to share it a little bit, right? And so it does take a conscious effort to be thinking about, like, wait a minute, maybe I could promote more women, maybe I could do this. There's been a big move to get more females on the boards of corporations. There are so many organizations that are doing that, and we've been really focused on it for like 20 years, and it's like notched up like 2%. Right? So even with that focus, at least it's notched up 2%, but it does take a conscious sort of effort by the people in power.
Okay.
So the other thing I would say is that women tend to limit themselves when they apply for jobs. Men will apply for a job that they're not qualified for because the job sounds fun.
Halfway qualified for.
Yeah. And women will look and say, I don't meet this one criteria, I'm not qualified, I will not apply.
That's right.
Don't ever do that. Apply for everything and anything you want and make somebody else tell you no.
Exactly. Yeah, and women also have to realize it's not, that's right. It's also, ladies, the gentlemen have known this for years, the world is not a meritocracy, right? No one's going to notice your great work if you're sitting there quietly doing great work. You've got to do a little, we call it shameless self-promotion, but people have to know your work. If you're just sitting there in a corner doing great work, they're not going to recognize it. Men have known how to do this for years. It's not about going around saying I, but you have to get out there. Opportunities won't come to you if nobody knows who you are.
Good. Back to the audience. We have some more questions here on the left, and we'll get to the center next.
Hi. Good morning. I'm Mary Jo Lampy. I'm an independent consultant to this industry, helping with strategy. I wanted to, I have a good question, but I actually wanted to say something that I think that just came up in kind of related to what you're saying. I once had a woman, friend, colleague, apologize for competing with me for a job and for beating me. And I realized how wrong that was, because I told her no guy would do that. They'd go, dude, I'm up against you. Next, for the winner buys drinks, right? Yeah. Right. So I was really, first off, I felt betrayed because she went after the position, but then I thought, I have no business doing that. And then she apologized, and so I realized that was kind of a big misstep, something we do, and I hated that, right? So we had that conversation. But I guess my question was, I'm always curious as to kind of the failures or missteps that we all have done that have kind of made us do a little, kind of a reshaping of ourselves, and how, any good stories you might have, but also, or maybe it's a misstep of your organization that helped shape a change in the environment. I'd be curious any significant stories you have.
I've got a funny one. It's funny now because it was so many years ago, but it was not funny at the time. So prior to applying to Homeland Security, I had applied to, and I'll put it out there because I've talked to the vice president from this, so it's all good. Wayne State University is where I got my master's, but I had applied to this community affairs position, and I was almost done with my master's, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to get this job. I'm good. I'm qualified. I got this covered. I didn't do any research on the office and like their latest projects or anything like that. I didn't take copies of my resume, just had this ego came from somewhere. I don't know where it came from, but it just showed up. And I get there to the interview, and he's like, yeah, so do you have copies of your resume? And I was like, no, I don't really have copies of the resume. And so, assistant goes and gets copies of the resume, and I'm like, starts asking questions about the organization. No, didn't really do any research for that. Let me tell you something. When I got the call for Homeland Security, I had copies of my resume. I had my portfolio of all the projects I'd done. I had researched everything, all the things Secretary Napolitano had been, initiatives that she probably thought she might want to get involved in. I had that all ready for the interview. And so that failure, and the VP is still there, and we've joked about it. I've run into him here in DC. We've still joked about it. It's funny now, but the last time I saw him, I was like, I want to thank you. I was like, I don't know that you remember. Oh, no, I remember. I'm very proud of where you are today, but oh, do I remember. I said, I want to thank you for that interview, because had I not done that, I would have had the same system failure showing up at Homeland Security, because no one told me. No one instructed me on how you play this game to win. So I just want to leave it with that's my leadership misstep. It'll never happen again.
Very good. If we have any others, we can wrap them into our final comments. We're near the end here. I know the organizers wanted to know your one best piece of advice. We've given a lot of advice already, I think, so maybe to revisit or think of something new, or to answer the continual question. The floor is yours, but we can walk down the line and give us your final thoughts. You get to go first again.
Be brave, be adaptable, and seek feedback. Even when it's wrong, stupid, uncomfortable, whatever, there's always a nugget of truth in feedback. And just go for it.
So this might sound a little redundant. Help isn't coming. We're the help that Jane's been looking for, and it's in this room.
Good.
My advice is leadership is about the people, because the people are the ones that help you get the mission done. As a leader, you're not responsible for everything, but you are culpable and accountable for everything.
Sweet answer. Be unapologetically you. You don't want any explanation. Just be you.
My advice is everyone should read Defense One after this. We have actually covered a lot of women's issues in the IC, particularly our author Gail Smock-Lamone, if you don't know her, who has it was branched out to lots of other things, author of the book Ashley's War, about some of the first women who had ranger jobs before they were allowed to be rangers, basically, who's now out, who has been going back and forth out into northern Syria, writing about the YPJ, the YPG, the women of the Syrian Democratic Force, the Kurds, and coming up soon now, the Arab women who have been inspired by the Kurdish women who joined that force to fight ISIS and liberate themselves. And we have a great article about what she says is probably the most interesting experiment in women's rights in the world right now that's going on there, with the civilian governance force coming up behind that force in northern Syria. That's my little plug at that. I figured this audience, if any, might be interested in that. So thank you to INSA for inviting me to this panel. Thank you for this wonderful panel for educating all of us and inspiring us. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. I think it's time for a break.
Thanks. Thanks, Kevin. Take a few points pointers from Kevin. He has no problem in self-promotion. So anyway, but want to thank Kevin and the panel for your time today. A couple of housekeeping issues. We'll be selling books. The Spy Museum will be here selling books, and some of the authors will be here to sign them, as well as Mary. And I'd like everybody to take a look around the room and notice all the men. And thank them, ask them why they're here, but they're a very important part of the conversation. So I'd like to give the men in the room a round of applause. In about 15 minutes, you'll hear a chime, and we'll regroup in this room for another panel. So thanks so much.